Essentially, this topic is a bunch of micro topics that are cobbled together by me, and the thing that they have in common is that these are what I have collected reasons why we study Torah. Now, the word Torah is a big word. It's essentially referring to the most intense and the oldest corpus of knowledge and learning that we have. It's the only multi-thousand-year-old documents that are, well, not the only, but it's one of the only, or at least maybe the oldest one that's still widely studied and still like the best-selling book. And not only the Torah. When we say Torah, when I say Torah, it's a word for all Jewish learning at large. So that would include the oral Torah and all the various addendums that have been added to the corpus of Jewish learning. That's what I mean when I refer to Torah. So, and this is something which we mentioned last week in great detail, but is very central to Jewish life. And also, we just celebrated the holiday of Shavuos or Shavuot a couple of days ago, and that's the holiday that we celebrate Jewish learning. That's the holiday that's the holiday that commemorates the day that we received the beginning of this ever-evolving process of Torah study. So what I wanted to do is to try to illuminate a little bit, for myself, but for everyone, a little bit of the value that we find in Jewish writings that's accorded to this particular activity of Torah study and how it affects a person. Because when we understand why we study Torah, we have a greater appreciation for, the historical significance of Torah in Jewish life, but also for us. We do this every week. We do Torah study. We read the Parsha. We study a Torah text. So whatever we do, we gain a renewed appreciation of the value and the impact that it has on our lives personally. So I want to start with reason number 6. I don't remember which ones we did last week. So if I start doing ones we did last week, we'll just move on to the next one.
Well, why don't we say what 1 through 5 is?
Yeah, so we started off
last time.
Yeah,
we did every topic that Miriam wanted to do.
Yes, that was great.
Huh?
Let's just start from reason 6. There's enough reasons here because we could do the whole thing over. We'll be here till 10 o'clock.
We'll start discussing the first 5 again.
Yeah. So let us to achieve unbiased intellect. That's what we didn't mention last week, I don't think. So our intelligence is essentially a very, very important tool for our lives. Now, why is that? Because our intelligence essentially is what separates us from animals. Animals also have bodies, and they can have babies, and they can have, they live lives, and they're born, and they grow up, and, they have interactions, and they die. Why are we different? Why are we special? Because we have intelligence. We have the capacity for abstract thinking. We have a soul as well. We'll get to the soul in a little bit.
You guys started with that?
Yeah.
We're actually wrapping up. Oh, we started at 7. You didn't
get the email, yeah. So, we have this tremendous tool that's going to help us in our lives. We're talking about the intelligence.
Whose?
Everyone. All humans. Now, if this is what makes us human, well, among other things, but one of the core tools that separate us from animals, and as we see, like our decisions that we make in our lives, hopefully should be grounded in logic and reason and in understanding and intelligence. That seems to be the best vetting process for decisions that we can make. That's why if someone is very intelligent, well, maybe they should be the ones who are deciding policy because they're more intelligent and therefore they have more capacity to make more decisions and take into account more variables, etc. But in our lives, we make decisions, what to do and who to marry and what the decisions and to change lanes or not to, right? These are decisions we make on a day-to-day basis. And of course, life decisions. So it's very important to have intelligence. However, this idea we find in Jewish writing that this intelligence can be corrupted. And our tremendous power that we have, this great mind that we're all given, can be biased, can be partial, and therefore can convince us that one thing is right and one thing is wrong. So let me give you an example how this works. We find a statement in the Talmud that says, "Ein lecha ben chorim ela mi she'osek b'Torah." You don't have a free man other than someone who studies Torah. Essentially, what it's saying is, this is a Mishnah in Chapters of the Fathers. If you study Torah, you're a free man. If you don't study Torah, you're not a free man. And the question is, if you look at the Torah, you just try to organize it in very simple columns, what you find is things that are limiting, right? What do you find? You find restrictions, you find laws. I got to do this, I can't do that. That's what you find, right? So essentially, if someone who's studying Torah, odds are they're going to be less free, less flexible in making decisions and what to do. It seems to be counterintuitive to say that someone who studies more Torah is more free. This is a good question that we could ask. But I think perhaps the answer is that what the Torah does, the Torah is God's brain, so to speak. And therefore, we are hooking our brain into God's brain, so to speak. We're trying to create a synergy between our intelligence, our human intelligence, which is very fallible, to God's intelligence, which is infallible. And when we do that, and the more Torah we study, well, then the more kind of cleansed our brain gets, and therefore the less likely it is to convince us of untruths. What do you say, Jeff? You have something to say? Yeah. So thus, perhaps we could say that we find in some Jewish sources the idea of dat Torah, which means knowledge of Torah, Torah brain, which essentially the way it's explained is that you take your brain that you got and you kind of upgrade it. You get the premium package. You upgrade to a pro version. Where
2.0 of
exactly 2.0 of the brain.
data version.
Where your brain when you get it, it's liable to be dominated by all these other forces. However, once you kind of hook it onto God's brain, which is a crazy thing, like you're creating some sort of equilibrium between your brain and God's brain. That's insane. That's what it is. Like the more Torah you study, the more you're trying to regulate your mind and your intelligence to God's mind and God's intelligence, which is that alone is a striking thought. But that the effect of that is that you achieve unbiased intelligence, which I think is something that we probably don't value so much because we're kind of okay with our intelligence. But in Jewish sources, this is a topic which is highlighted again and again. That is that a human could be convinced of it. Like, just give you guys an example here. Like, I'm sure it's happened to all of us. Like, you're in a debate with someone, be an argument or debate, and at a certain point in time, you realize that the other person is right. It doesn't happen that frequently to me, but it's a joke. And then you still feel a need. You still feel a need to kind of argue your point. I don't know if it's happened to you. There's this urge that you get to not give in. Yes, and then you try to bring proofs. It means you still feel a need to kind of defend something that you know is wrong. Well, how does that work? How is your brain, which is designed essentially to try to clarify, and how is it trying to prove something which you already know deep down is wrong? Well, that's an example of a brain that went awry. A brain that's biased. And if it's biased, well, and if it has it starts with a predisposition towards one side, well, that's what you'll end up as. And therefore, this tool that you have will be underutilized.
I'm trying to think of the right words. Like, there's like some examples where these Torah scholars, it doesn't take them the right path. Like, the people that stone and throw rocks at people.
Yeah, well, those are generally those are not the scholars. Trust me, I've been there. Those are not the scholars. Those scholars are scholaring. Scholar. Yeah. Listen, we even find this idea. I'll say your point. We find this idea in the Talmud. The Talmud says that for some people, when they study Torah, nasa lo samachayim. We mentioned this last week. For some people, when they study Torah, it becomes an elixir of life for them. However, for some people, it becomes this poison. So I do think there is something true to what you're saying, that for some people, it's not so clear who fits into which category, but for some people, there is a potential of the Torah to actually have a negative effect on them. And I think the probable answer to that is when someone tries to use the Torah from the beginning to try to prove their point.
It's means more of an ideology.
Well, not an ideology, but using it as what's described in the Mishnah as a kardom lachborbo, as you want to use the Torah as a shovel to dig with, to kind of prove your point. If you are trying to shoehorn the Torah into your position, right? The Torah is that's the that's the poison pill. When you don't take it and let it influence you, rather you use it and contrive it in a way that it'll fit what you want it to fit with. So I think there is that potential. But if someone approaches the Torah kind of honestly and tries to be receptive, to try to understand it, to try to understand it, not to try to use it, as a pawn in what you want, in your agenda,
Right.
then I think it's less risk to that.
If we ask them, they would say, you are
Of
actually
course,
twisting
that's
the
also
Torah
biased.
so that
Yeah. Well, listen, there's always going to be the extremes of any group. There's going to be the ones, and we've all, I don't know if we've all seen the pictures, but there's the pictures of the guys wearing the strimals giving hugs and kisses to Arafat and Ahmadinejad. Have you seen those pictures?
Yep.
Everyone's seen those pictures, right? So,
They don't know what you're talking about.
okay, so there's really people that look very religious, very observant. They have huge beards and payas and hats and furry coats and whatnot, and they're hugging and kissing Ahmadinejad, and they're burning Israeli flags, and they're holding up Palestinian flags, and they're praying by the tomb of Arafat, right? And Arafat had a few of these guys on his cabinet. These people outwardly look very, very observant. Like if you looked and looked, oh, this guy's a holy rabbi. When in fact they're just, they're traitors against their religion. That's what they are. But if there's 12 of them, that's all you need to fill up a picture to make them look really.
Rabbi Akiva's students, that's not really fanatics, right? That's like an example where they were Torah scholars.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I just don't know if intelligence is the right word. Maybe,
For what?
Maybe it just goes with another word as well.
No, I'm saying for this, I'm using that as Torah cleansing intelligence. That I think is a good question. How in Jewish life we mourn those people. These are clearly great scholars. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that they were corrupted. It seems like the reason why they had to undergo what happened to them has more to do with the kind of what's expected from someone of their caliber. Either way, that's an idea. What do y'all say? Move on to the next one. So you guys want to sell down? We'll never get to number 23. I gave up.
Yeah,
just right now. Yeah, go ahead.
23.
That's right. I
Was
pushed
that
it
Jew
23.
prayed at Arafat's grave?
Yeah, he's a Jew, but like I said, he's a traitor to his nation. And you know what? If he was here, I would tell him straight to his face. Right? Just because you may have some ideological hang-ups with Zionism or whatnot, it doesn't mean that you go and fraternize with the enemy and go hug and kiss someone who blatantly and overtly and in front of everyone calls for the destruction and the slaughter of millions of Jews. Even if you don't like something, if there's something wrong with the state, I think we're all in favor of the state of Israel. I'm going to make that assumption. If it's not, then let's make that assumption. I think
that's a safe bet.
it's a safe assumption. Okay.
Let me put that.
However-
Yes, we are.
Okay. However, is everyone here going to say that everything that the state of Israel has ever done is 100% correct? I don't think anyone's going to say that.
110%. Right.
Well,
Everything's right.
however, when Israel has its battles or with its enemies, we support Israel 100%. No matter what. Because that's family and we're Jews and this is our state and this is what we support. So if you have some issues, and I know these people that are, I guess, that appear to be very, very religious Jews who support the Arabs, they have at their core ideological problems with the state. Okay, so what? We all agree that not everything that Israel does is 100% correct. Just because you have ideological problems with the state should not translate into you befriending people that have lots of Jewish blood on their hands, like in the case of Arafat, or the people that want nothing more than to see the absolute destruction of the state of Israel and the murder of its citizens. So that's my point. My point is that you have, if you have...
About his point, if you mean intelligence or not, when you were mentioning this case of, you don't want to admit that you're wrong, and then you will try to... The bias come from probably more emotional side of your brain more than the intelligence part of your
I think the big picture, the bias comes from the fact that your soul is not in pole position on deciding what you feel, what you think, right?
Right.
So therefore, you have this power, this tool that you're using for your benefit.
I mean, your intelligence
But what's your benefit?
tells you, right, that the other's right. You already came to a conclusion. Now your feelings, your ego is at play, and then you try to...
And I think it may be more subtle than that, where you might not even know that your intelligence is corrupted. This is a case where we can still use the intelligence towards what we know is wrong, but I think there's other times where we don't even realize, at least at the time, that we're just not talking absolute logic because of what we already want. I'll give you an example. I've countless times debated people about the validity of the historicity of the Torah. Countless times. And many, many times...
Have you ever won one of those?
One? Well, it depends.
Have you ever convinced the other side?
Well...
I've engaged in those two.
Okay, we've had very, very compelling arguments. However, there have been some times where after copious evidence has been presented, someone would say, well, maybe all the Jews were on shrooms or hallucinogenic drugs. Right? I've been there many, many times. Which is someone saying, I am not willing to accept, no matter what evidence is brought to me, the fact that the Jewish people had this experience at Mount Sinai, and that they had the manna for 40 years, and that they had the water from the rock, despite the evidence. Well, maybe they just were all convinced. And how were they all convinced? Because they had the hallucinogenic drugs.
To be fair, the scripture does say they saw the voices.
Well, okay.
They saw the voices.
But the point is that...
When you're on shrooms 4 days...
What is the pasuk?
And all the people saw the voices.
Well, but when it's described, it's describing their experience that they had at Mount Sinai. It's describing a paranormal, or metaphysical experience, which we say they did, right? They had prophecy. What does that mean? You're not seeing things that normally could be seen or could be measured physically, empirically.
Also, then your experience colors how you view
But
the situation.
my point that I want to bring is that this is not a logical argument. This is a last-ditch attempt to try to posit something which is insane to try to defend your position that you want. It's not a logical argument. What's more logical? That millions of people all had hallucinogenics for 40 years? Or that, no, they actually saw what they saw? Well, that's obviously the latter is more logical. Right? That's what, that's just like we don't say that all the people that encountered Abraham Lincoln were on shrooms, Right? We don't say that, right? Because it's not logical. We have no record of that, and who's to say? Then every historical event that's ever happened could be just well, maybe they were all just hallucinating.
Well, people can be cool.
I understand. But my point is that they're employing their logic to try to support
before the Sinai
their position that they pre-selected with cockamamie theories.
But before they received the Torah, they didn't study Torah, so they had biased intelligence.
Oh, I agree that some of the people also look what happened.
People may be persuaded.
Read the Torah. The Torah outlines that even though that they've had tremendous experiences, still they were said, "Bring us back to Egypt." Well, what's that? What's that a manifestation of? Right? Yeah. Of not being, of maybe being prematurely elevated to a level that they weren't ready for, and at their core, they were just still, defiant. Either way, I think my point is
We're still in sixth grade.
Shall we continue? Go
You're
ahead.
gonna have to
That's
switch
just
seats.
one thing
But
to
yeah.
know is that
Bonnie's gonna sit between you.
could it be?
So we don't get to
Here you go. Here you go.
Yes.
Could it
I
be?
apologize.
No, I take this seriously. You should know by now.
You take me seriously?
No, this. Not you.
Right, nobody takes me seriously. Yeah, go ahead.
Could it be that these religious men reach such a high level in their Judaism that they can forgive their enemy without regards to any personal feelings?
Are
You're
you still
talking-
talking about the people that love the Arafat?
Yeah, I'm
Oh, you're stuck on that.
We
It's you.
No,
I didn't even know it
There's
existed.
this-
So
no,
my
yeah,
mind
yeah.
keep is running at
No. There's
There's
absolutely no justification
Yeah.
of getting of siding with enemies of Jews. Absolutely no justification.
Maybe they're on shrooms.
No, they're not in shrooms. They are people that have that have a divide between an ideology and the proper application of that. Just like we all say we support Israel, even though we don't necessarily agree with everything they do. So what? We don't say, oh, because Israel does X, I'm going to go and join the ISIS, right? That doesn't make any sense, right?
One last comment on this.
Go
Remember during the Arab-Israeli war, the Israeli soldiers were saving Arab enemies by international agreement. So could it be the same thing?
Now what?
Like, during the war, you're supposed to kill each other. Now, if you're injured, then you have to save you by agreement. So Israeli soldiers were saving Arab injured Palestinians.
Yes.
Right? So was it kind of running the same parallel?
With that?
Okay,
No,
this
there's
guy-
You gotta see the pictures and whatnot.
yeah.
This is totally different.
And the pictures present the image that kind of quote unquote religious Jews are supportive of the Palestinians. And like I said, it's a fraction of a 1%. It's like 10 people. And they make a lot of noise because they have very long pace.
And it was a gesture more than I forgive you for all but you have.
Yeah, we don't forgive
so,
evil.
yeah.
Sorry, we don't forgive Arafat, nor Hitler, nor Ahmadinejad.
They're
We don't condone
Haman.
that kind of
I
behavior.
forgot Aman.
Or Haman, that's right. Or there's a whole list.
There's a thread
Get in line.
in my mind
Yes.
based upon conversations I've had on one or more of my visits to Israel, talking with the ultra-Orthodox people.
Mm-hmm.
And the thread that keeps going through my mind is that they have said that the government of Israel
Mm-hmm.
is a criminal government because there will be no true government of Israel until the day of the Mashiach.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason why they're given it for all the animosity that there is between the government and religious people.
Well, I'm saying the tension, I think, is a good word between religion and let's say the politics. Political tension exists between the religious and secular groups in Israel. It's a very, very interesting topic. I actually spoke about it. It's on the list as one of the topics that we could talk about over here. But that's a common perception, I would say. There's varying levels of that perception. But and I mentioned this already. There are some religious Jews that don't accept the legitimacy of the state of Israel because of religious or political reasons. Okay, just like there were some Reform Jews. In fact, the majority of the Reform Jews and the Reform Jewry at large on a movement-based level did not accept Zionism at its inception. So ironically, at the formation of Zionism, the two groups that were opposed to Zionism were the Reform Jews on one hand and the very, very religious Jews on the other hand. And obviously that kind of has merged where almost all the Jews today support the state of Israel. That being said, even those that do support the state of Israel some of them do question the legitimacy of the state. Many of them based upon famous Talmud in the book of Ksubos. Even those that question the state, there's those that say, okay, fine, there shouldn't be a state, we shouldn't vote. Some people say, oh, we don't vote, and don't vote, you can't vote in the elections. And those say, no, we support the state, we do participate, we do vote. And there are others that say, no, we vote, and this is our state, this is the sprouting of the Messiah. There's a lot of different opinions scattered in that spectrum with the religious Jews and the state of Israel. But either way, only a very select few of them say, we're so disenchanted with the state that we're going to support the Arabs. And that's my point. I'm saying, yes, a lot of people have ideological hang-ups with the state. All of us even here agree that we may have had an ideological hang-up with the state. That doesn't mean that you don't support the enemy. That doesn't justify that. So like I said, I agree that this is a very fascinating topic, kind of the historical responses the Jewish people had towards Zionism and where it all came from and the various different groups that Herzl tried to cobble together, how he kind of collected two very, very different groups to kind of unite under the Zionist banner. You had on one hand the religious Jews that thought this was a fulfillment of the Messianic era. Then you had the very, very secular, like Herzl, who didn't speak Hebrew or give his kid a brit milah, circumcision, or anything, right? Herzl's son Hans did not have not a circumcision, not a bar mitzvah. That's right. And in fact, Herzl in 1890, a mere 7 years before the first Zionist Congress in Basel, he advocated that the solution to the Jewish problem should be mass conversion to Christianity. So Herzl's not someone that would. Herzl is not someone that he advocated that the mass conversion to Christianity would be the only way the Jewish people were integrated. Clearly, he's not coming from a very traditional attitude. I said Herzl in 1890 advocated that the only solution for the Jewish people's lack of acceptance and integration to European culture was mass conversion to Christianity. That's what Herzl wrote in 1890. So, Christianity. Clearly, this is not someone coming from a very, very traditional Jewish perspective. No one's going to argue that. But these two groups kind of merged.
Yeah, not even reform. Nobody will advocate.
That's right. That's beyond anything, right? His own children and his grandchildren converted to Christianity. But either way, those two groups kind of united under the one flagship of Zionism. Which is remarkable. And Israel's the kind of the product of those two groups, really. And I would say even today, the various groups within Israel, you have the mitnachlim and what's called the right and the left wings of the Israeli populace. They're really essentially these two groups continually existing. You have those that say we're not giving up an inch of the land, right? Because this is our land. In their minds, they're thinking about the messianic perspective of Israel, and we're reestablishing sovereignty, and this is all kind of the religious Zionist perspective. And then you have those who are quote unquote more pragmatic and treating our state as being no different than any other state, and therefore we should maybe negotiate. Either way, so I don't remember how we got there, but we're still. Yes, I would agree that there are a lot of religious Jews that have ideological problems with the state. That doesn't mean that we go and join Ahmadinejad. That's my point. Regardless of whatever the reasons why someone would have an ideological problem, that shouldn't translate into supporting the enemy. Shall we? Okay, thank you. So let's move on to another reason why we study Torah. This is kind of an interesting reason. Oh yeah, let's do it.
We reviewed the first 5.
Yeah,
when you were not here.
Get him as anything.
Number 2. I was here for the first 5, so it was okay.
So you missed number 6.
Yes.
Number 6 was negotiating. Last week.
Also, it was kind of a run up to this class, which is why we study Torah. Different reasons why we study Torah. Okay, so reason number 6, or 7, I lost track. To empower and awaken the soul. We find some very interesting sources in Jewish writing about the nature and the status of a soul, of a neshama, before birth. And the most striking one of those sources is in the Talmud, in Nida, 30b. And it says that a child, when the child's in gestation, the child studies the entire Torah. Which is bizarre because...
Then you get a little thing.
And then as the child's about to be born, I might have mentioned this, the child's about to be born. It's well known. Okay, it's well known. Child's about to be born, an angel comes and hits him on the mouth and makes the child forget it. Everyone's heard that before? Right? If you haven't heard it before, you heard it now, right? Well, this is what it says. This is the Talmud in Nida 30b. A child in utero knows the whole Torah. As he's about to be born, the child forgets the entire Torah. Okay?
That's why he cried.
Really expresses the theme of why we study Torah.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I hear the word study group, Torah study group, the song goes through my head.
Mm.
It's a children's song. It starts with Zoom, golly, 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 Zoom, golly, golly. Zoom, golly, 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 Zoom, golly, golly. Eretz Yisrael, Beli Kol Chai, Hike Guf, Beli Deshama. Zoom, golly, 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 Zoom, golly, golly. Zoom, golly, 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 golly. Zoom, golly, golly. That's all I remember.
What does it say about the Torah study?
Well, it says that the state of Israel,
Mm-hmm.
without the Torah, would be the same as an individual without a soul.
Mm-hmm. The body without a soul. Interesting. Maybe we have to add this onto the list. That this is a
24.
24. Yeah, we do find there's a fascinating statement in one of the rabbis in the Talmud. It was Rabbi Zera, and it's talking about how we know that throughout history the Jews were not always entirely living in Israel. For the vast majority of our history, at least go back a couple thousand years, there was a center of Jewish life and scholarship in Babylon. And there was, over the time of the Talmud, the hundreds of years throughout the Talmud, we talk about the exchange of ideas and individuals, where they had these two concurrent communities, one in Israel, one in Babylon, and then every once in a while, one of the scholars would go, would travel to the other place, and they would always have this expression of ideas being traded back and forth. And it tells a story about this great rabbi who was in Babylon. Then he comes to Israel. And when he comes to Israel, it says the first thing he did, he started praying. What did he pray? He prayed to forget all of his Torah. Which is bizarre. Like, why would you want to forget all your great rabbi? Rabbi's there. And then the Talmud says, because he said, he reasoned, Ein Torah Torah Eretz Yisrael. There's no Torah like the Torah of Israel. He wanted to forget it all and start from scratch because there's something special about the Torah of Israel. Kind of a little similar to what you're saying, that Israel has, or it's a special place for designed or qualified, particularly qualified for Torah study, and that's what it's all about, to get to Israel and to study Torah in Israel. That's the ultimate. Very, very interesting. So we have this child in utero. A child knows the whole Torah. Angel comes, makes him forget it. Now, there's a lot of very important questions we can ask. Number one, okay, if the angels are going to make him forget it, well, why should the child know the whole Torah to begin with? Which is a good question, right? If you're going to forget it anyhow, well, why study the whole Torah? If you knew for sure that in 9 months the child's going to forget the entire Torah, why would you teach the child the Torah and only to have the child forget it? Additionally, there's more of a more of a textual problem, because the Talmud sources that from a verse in Genesis. Anytime a Talmud says a law or an idea, it has to be a source for it. It has to show how this idea is reflected in Scripture. So it says, how is this idea reflected in Scripture? Where in the Torah does it say anything that a child forgets the Torah as he's about to be born? And it quotes a verse in Genesis, Lefetach chatas rovates, at the entrance sin crouches. Thus, at the entrance, if the child's about to enter the world, sin is awaiting him. I guess the idea being that the child forgets the Torah, and once you forget the whole Torah, well, then sin could just happen because you don't know Torah. How are you possibly not going to sin? That's what the source is. Problem is if you look at a different part of the Talmud asks a different question, and it's talking about when does someone get a soul, and when does someone get a yetzer ra? It's called the evil inclination. We spoke about it a little bit last week. And the Talmud proves that the child gets the soul at conception. Okay, so at conception, child gets the soul. However, child does not get the yetzer ra, the evil inclination, till birth. And it says, how do we know that the child gets the yetzer ra at birth? And it brings the same verse in Genesis. Lefetachat, the surface at the entrance, sin crouches. Right? Thus implying that as the child's about to be born, well, now they're going to have the yetzer ra, which is going to compel the child to sin. Sin is, they are awaiting him. What's the obvious question? If you have one verse that says sin crouches at the entrance, how could you possibly use that one verse for these two laws or these two ideas, that the child forgets the whole Torah and that the child gets the yetzer ra? This is a question that everyone asks. Wait a minute, we know that one verse equals one law or one idea. You cannot use the same verse to teach you multiple laws.
It's the same.
Oh, yeah. How do you know that? How do you know that? So one of the answers by the Maharal, the great commentator who mentioned that they were in Prague. Yes, thank you. From Prague, the great 16th century commentator, he says like this. He says the child, really only one thing happens. The child starts off the conception and they have a soul. And the soul knows the whole Torah innately. The soul knows the whole Torah innately. And therefore, throughout the gestation period, the child knows the whole Torah. Okay. As the child's about to be born, they get the influence of the yetzer ra, the evil inclination. And then as a result of that, they forget the whole Torah. So essentially only one thing happens, you only need one verse. That's his answer. So, and this also answers our original question, is that it's not that we teach the child the Torah and then we make him forget it. It's that the child has a soul, has a neshama, and the soul itself knows the whole Torah. And we didn't teach it to him. The soul is just what he has. It's just the physiological makeup of what a soul is. And then that gets covered up, and that's the influence of that gets reduced. It gets muffled. It gets muzzled. It gets beladen by the influence of the yetzer ra, the evil inclination, and then as a result of that, the child forgets it. Now, if we're to extrapolate this, okay, so what happens, or what's our goal in life if you look at it from these lenses? We have this powerful soul, this tremendous influence for good within ourselves. However, it's buried under the mountain of the evil inclination. We have to burrow down and try to uncover that. When we study Torah, right, remember, the soul knows the whole Torah. That's what the soul's comprised of. We're essentially, we're awakening the soul. It's as if the soul kind of hears this voice, and someone's talking in its mother tongue. It's like imagine the soul being trapped under this monstrosity of the yetzer ra, of the evil inclination, and now it hears a little bit of the Torah, and it creates a link between someone's consciousness and someone's soul, and it makes a little ding, a little chink in the armor of this yetzer ra, and it slowly mitigates the effect and the power of the yetzer ra, and it creates a bond between someone's consciousness and someone's soul. Go ahead.
Why do we give so much power to evil? Well, you say we've got this mountain of evil on top of the soul. Why do we?
Well, I wouldn't say that it has more power per se.
We're giving a lot of credence to evil, to bad things, to sin.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the first thing that I want to mention, I know we mentioned this last week, that in the Midrash, it labels the yetzer ra, we call the evil inclination, exceedingly good. You guys remember that we talked about that last week? Tov ma'od, it's very good, because if not for the yetzer ra, if not for evil inclination, life would have zero meaning. Why is that? If everyone was inclined to do only good and had nothing trying to pull it to do evil or bad or sin, whatever word you want to. If you had no influence, no drive to sin, then would there be anything remarkable by the fact that someone didn't sin or someone did good? Of course not. Right? There's no friction. There's no tension. There's no resistance to good. Thus, this Yetzer Hara, this reality, is the engine that drives everything. If we didn't have that, then what would our life really mean? It would just be perfunctory, doing what we're pre-programmed to do. This creates the struggle and the conflict that we all have in our lives, where we're torn. We're torn between the body and the soul. We're torn between the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. We're torn between our desire for good, our knowledge of the importance of good, and our kind of materialistic or bodily attraction to evil or to bad. Evil is a strong word. So it's not that the Almighty wants to make our life miserable and wants to give so much strength to the quote-unquote evil side, the dark side. It's for us, this makes our life meaningful. If we didn't have this, our life would not mean anything. Humanity, all this wonderful experiment of humanity, it's such a nice thing. We all pretty happy with humans, right? That only has any value because of the Yetzer Hara. It creates the arena for life to have any meaning. Otherwise, we're all animals. Animals, they just live their lives and that's it. They die, and there's no super remarkable, and nothing. No one accomplishes that much or goes off. There's no great or evil animals. There's nothing remarkable. The life doesn't have meaning. So yes, on an absolute level, it's bad because it's trying to compel us to sin. Sin's a bad thing.
It's almost not natural to be good.
Well, I would say
by design.
By design, it's not natural.
Well, yeah.
So Hitler was just following his natural impulses.
Let's not get Hitler involved here. Well, I agree with what you're saying partially, because you say natural. It's not natural it's very, very, very natural for the soul to be good. And it's very, very natural for the evil inclination to be bad. The question is, the human, kind of the melding of the two, the fusion of the two, which way is the human leaning? So clearly we have a propensity to lean towards, or at least at the beginning of our lives, we start off being almost entirely under the dominion of our body / the Yetzer Hara. The question is that then it has to be like that, because remember, if it was equal, if it was balanced entirely, like it was just exactly 100% equal, then everyone would do good, because good is good, and you are equally attracted to it. So it's either or.
It's about the height of the mountain. There's this concept of that God gives you the right amount that you need, not more nor less. Like the story of Yosef with the fragrance and so on. He was being slave.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, that's kind of more what we're talking about, retribution and punishment, and kind of being a consumer of evil, as opposed to being an influence.
The right amount, not more.
Yeah. So yes, it's formidable, the mountain, but it's still conquerable. But you're right. It's not natural for us to do good, because the breakdown of what we feel and what our attraction towards the quote unquote evil is much stronger than our attraction to good. Because otherwise, if they were imbalanced, if they were entirely balanced, everyone would do only good, and then you lose this whole engine, this whole meaning that we.
If they were totally balanced, why do you say people would do only good?
Well, because you're equally driven towards both of them, but we know that doing good also stirs your soul as well. Like, we know what's good and what's bad. That's not the question. If you knew what was good and what was bad, and you're equally driven towards both of them, well, then you would just do good. So it has to be that you know that good is good and you know that bad is bad, but you're more driven towards bad, and that creates that. I'll wrap this up really nicely. It's a nice little bow. We find another statement, another instruction in the chapters of the Fathers that says, have a rutz l'mitzvah kal kamor. You should chase after even a simple mitzvah or a complex or a hard mitzvah, and uborech min avera, and run away from sin, which seems to indicate, exactly like what this model that you have to run away from sin. Right? If you're just sedentary, if you're not doing anything to counteract that, then the sin's chasing after you, so to speak. But the mitzvah, you got to chase it down. It's running away from you. So that's the reality, where the mitzvah is running away from you and the sin is chasing after you.
I can change your question. You said that for every thing in the Talmud there is a reference in scriptures. Mm-hmm. And you said that this neshama is put at conception. Where is that coming from?
That comes from. Well, first, if I remember correctly, it's actually a debate between Antoninus and Rebbe. Antoninus is the last time I said it was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, and I says, "Whoa, I don't know for sure," but most likely Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, who was the right. Last time I said that, you jumped to me. Okay, so he
don't make
is
the same mistake.
Right. So most likely, according to most, he is the Roman emperor who assumed emperorship in the year 161. I know we went through this last time. He's called Antoninus in Jewish writings, and that's his Roman name or whatever. But in Wikipedia, it's called Marcus Aurelius and then Antoninus in parentheses. I don't know. We call Marcus Aurelius, but his name that he was called at the time was Antoninus.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Oh, that's after the Gladiator.
Okay,
so he has, there's several times in the Talmud that he has debates or discussions with Rabbi Judah the Prince, who is the prince of the Jewish people, the head of the Sanhedrin, and the pivotal figure of the Jewish people in the second half of the 2nd century of the Common Era. And one of the discussions that they have is, well, when does this person get the soul? And Rabbi Judah the Prince agrees to Antoninus, because Antoninus originally he brings a logical response, and he says, is it possible to have a slab of meat and not salt it for 3 days and it shouldn't spoil? Which say, well, what's talking about meat here, right? But it means is that just like the piece of meat is not going to maintain its vitality, its life, so to speak, unless you preserve it. So too, the human, or whatever the human is, the zygote, at conception, it's not going to have any vitality if it doesn't have the spiritual power linked to it as well. And then Rebbe also brings a verse. I forgot the verse he brings. It's in the Kiddush. It's in Sanhedrin 91b.
No, it's incorrect.
I don't remember which one it is. If I remembered, I would just tell it to you. But yes, there's a verse. There is a verse.
But it comes from the
reading
Torah. There must be a pasuk, a word or something. And the other one is abortion is not strictly permitted.
When I spoke about abortion, I mentioned this as an indicator that maybe abortion, the laws of abortion, maybe shouldn't take this into account. But even the zygote has a soul, according to Jews. That may not mean anything, but it's something at least for the discussion.
Right, because this is opposite of when the head comes out and all this discussion about.
What is this? Where is this? Oh, you found it here? Oh, there we go. So there we go. And he brings a verse. He brings a verse from Job. Job 10:12. That's the verse. Okay. So first he brings the proof of the 3 days of Edim.
So what does it say, that pasuk? Lost it. The one that you just quoted.
what it means, probably from the Mishat Pekida, which means conception, then he had the Ruchi, which means the spirit. So he had the spirit from conception. Good. So, either way, if we have the soul, and it's almost inaccessible to us, it's so distant from us. Like I always like to give this example that we're not linked in a sensory way to our soul. We're linked to our body in a sensory way. We feel what our Yetzirah or body wants us to. You eat the popcorn, you feel it. But you do a mitzvah, you don't feel it. You may feel it on more of an emotional level, on a spiritual level, on a more kind of.
Who's to say that's not the soul?
Huh?
Who's to say that's not the soul?
Sorry, what's not the soul?
There's feelings, there's emotions.
The emotions of what? Of emotional feeling of doing something good? Yeah, I think it is. I agree, but it's not a sense. I agree that we can feel it a little bit, but it's on this other level. It's not like on a sensory level. It's not on a basic level. It's more of a some transcendental level. We feel it. It's a good. There's a good feeling of doing something good. You cannot measure it. You can't taste it. You can't. It's not as closely linked as the physical sense. I agree that you feel it for sure. And because you do have a soul, this is the glass of water for the soul. This is the popcorn for the soul. This is ice cream for the soul, and the soul is still within you, but it's not as tangible as the feelings that we have when our body gets tantalized. So, and studying Torah is one way to create this link. So you're doing something that your soul is suddenly awakened and it's empowered, and it's cleaving away a little bit at this barrier and trying to recreate this unity between who we are and the power of our souls. Okay, let's move on to the next one. What do you guys say?
Was it 7, 8?
Well, I think we kind of did this last week, Yetzirah. We did it. So let's move on to number 10 here.
What happened to 9?
Yeah. So
That's right up Jeff's alley.
we have two problems with our more than two problems with our religion, but two problems with our theology or our kind of relationship with God. Well, we have one problem and one kind of major problem. One more theoretical problem. So, problem number one is that we find in the Shema. The Shema is the Pledge of Allegiance of a Jew. Right? So we make a declaration of faith, and then we have a verse that I'm sure we're all familiar here. And the verse in English says, "You should love your God, the Almighty God, Creator of heaven and earth, right, with all your hearts and with all your souls and with all your resources," or however you want to translate modecha, resources. What it's telling us is not just understanding God or agreeing with God or agreeing to the idea, not being an atheist. It's telling us also that this has to translate into an emotional phase as well. It's demanding of us to uplift our faith from a intellectual kind of reality that we can accept, or we can prove, we can bring evidence to, or we can understand, to an emotional level, to love. Now that is a very, very steep demand. Right? We're telling us that this idea of God, especially the Jewish God, which is very distant from our understanding. Well, I'm saying, but the Jewish definition of God. The Jewish definition of God, it's not something tangible. You can't see God. You can't interact with God. You have no interface with God. You're physical. You're finite. God's infinite. You have no interplay with God. There's no interface that you have with God. It's not like something that you could see or could touch or could have any sensory understanding of God. And we're supposed to have an emotional connection with that. What's the deal? Like, how is, and that's demanded of us, and we all say, it's a verse that we say. It's part of our religion. How could the Torah reasonably demand of us to not only, well, I can understand maybe to accept God, but to translate that into an emotion, into an emotional connection with God?
Actually, there are two things. One is to relate something finite with something infinite. Mm-hmm. The other one is to force somebody to love something.
Right. which you could argue that wait a minute, it's
Love
either happens or it doesn't happen, right? So that's the problem. I think the more but also like even just to have some sort of interface with God, like even to understand God, like we have a hard time understanding God, and how do we approach that faith that it should be real with us? How do we have a tangible and real feeling of faith with the God that we cannot even really wrap our heads around? The idea of something existing outside of time and space is a very hard thing for humans to wrap their heads around. The idea of an infinite, of not limited in any way, like that's something which is very hard for us because we're wired to not understand that. We're wired to see the world and that there's time and space, and you can't exist if there's no time and space. But, the Jewish definition of God says that God does exist outside of time and space. And God, we're finding God's infinite. So we're supposed to understand that, but how do we do that? So these are kind of two problems. One of them is kind of how is it demanded from us to have an emotional connection with God? And additionally, just the idea of understanding and not interacting necessarily, but having a real, genuine, sincere, tangible faith with the definition of God that we're working with. So we find a tremendous insight in the words of Maimonides. Maimonides tells us Maimonides wrote many books. One of them is called Sefer HaMitzvot. Maimonides says we know the decision of 13 mitzvot. Everyone knows that. What's 1, what's 2, what's 3, what's 4, and what's 613. And you know what? I'll do it in order of importance, which is Maimonides like Joey said. I'll tell you. Not only will I tell you them in order, I'll tell you which is in, which is out, so to speak, but I'll tell you them in order of importance, which is
just trying to show off.
Which is incredible. Like you have the book of the Chinuch that we mentioned last week, the book of education. That also is a book that's written on the 613 mitzvos. He counts the 613 mitzvos, and in fact, he doesn't use his own counting. He just piggybacks on Maimonides' counting. But he starts from Genesis and moves on and goes throughout the Torah. Maimonides is starting in order of importance. Right? Like the first mitzvah is the most important one. The second mitzvah is the second most important. The third is the third most important one. And maybe perhaps also the last one is, it's an order of importance. And by the way, Maimonides' magnum opus, the Mishnah Torah, was written the same way. Starting from the most important mitzvah to the least important mitzvah, seemingly. Well, not least important mitzvah, but in descending degree of importance.
What's the 16th, 13th
mitzvah? Good question. Well, let's start from the more important ones. So the first mitzvah obviously is to have faith in God. I think that's fair. That's obviously you don't have that, then you don't have anything. But the third mitzvah is to love God. Obviously, the mitzvah of loving God is not something which is it's not something which is kind of an afterthought. It's something very important. And he tells you, how do you love God? That's our question. How do you love God? And he gives us this. If we had to all guess, if we just went around the room here and said, okay, what do you think he's going to say? I don't think anyone will get within miles of what he says. Which now maybe you will.
Flowers?
Yeah. Chocolate and flowers.
I didn't know he ordered them in the order of importance.
Well, it's nowhere is it explicit, but it's heavily implied.
Yeah, I didn't want to
know that.
jump into that, but I didn't know there were the order
I thought every
in order of
mitzvah
importance.
you couldn't determine which one is
More important
than the other one. I've never heard that before.
Well, okay. Well, but if we read it, it's clearly designed. Means I don't think it's explicit in any of Maimonides' writing. He doesn't write that, but it's heavily implied. What's the first that he tackles in the Mada? It's the first thing is Yesodei Torah, foundations of the Torah, and then the first book of the Yad HaChazaka deals with 5 laws of the foundations of Torah, which is like our theology, prophecy, free will. That's what he's tackling. The laws of Torah study, the laws of idolatry, and obviously repudiation of that, the laws of character, and the laws of tshuva, of repentance. Clearly, these are big topics, macro topics. By the way, the last thing that he does talk about is the laws of Mashiach. Interestingly, right after the laws of Gentiles, which I always said. He's writing a book for Jews, and he's telling you that that more important than studying Mashiach is you should know what evil Gentiles need to do, which is I think very interesting because he even tones it down in his 2 or 3 chapters that he writes about Mashiach. He tells you don't think about this too much because this could make you go a little cuckoo. Either way, so how do you love God?
I guess studying Torah.
So what he still says, he says, not only that, he gives a four-pronged process. He says, I want you to study Torah or study science and be misbonen. Right? Be misbonen is to contemplate, but what it means to study Torah intently. Until ad shiyasideo, until you have an insight, an incredible insight in either Torah or science. And then you should have pleasure in this insight, in this achievement, which is the highest level of pleasure. That's what means love God.
How did he define science?
He was a science.
Oh, he was the handiwork of God. That's how science is still defined.
The handiwork
Yeah.
of God.
That's right.
You're a handy worker?
Handy Manny?
No, but the
Bob,
Torah, thus, we'll get to your point in a second. Torah and science share a commonality according to the Rambam, right? We would argue that Torah is God's mind, and science is what God created, God's handiwork. And these two are quote-unquote intermediaries that we could use to understand God. We have a hard time understanding Torah, understanding God himself. However, once we dip our toe into the dizzying complexity of Torah, or the dizzying complexity of science, and the deeper we go, the more we see, the more we learn, the more we realize how little we knew earlier, which is the pattern of scientific discovery and of Torah discovery. It's always exactly the same. And then you dig yourself deeper, and the more you know, the more you realize how little you know. That process opens up your mind to something amazing beyond what you could imagine. And when that moment of awe, of the realization of the vastness and the complexity of God's handiwork and God's mind, those bring you to a certain degree of perception of God himself. And that and that also translates into an emotional reaction. He said this deep pleasure that you get. And thus, this reason number 10 is that via the Torah study and science as well. But Torah study is a way to really understand God. And to understand God on the scale that we're talking about, which is not really a scale because that's the whole point. It doesn't scale, right? But the idea of infinity, of something not having any limitations, is something we find in the Torah and science as well. On a small degree, and that we use to understand, I'm saying a small degree of God himself. But I would argue still. I would make that argument still.
I'll let you go with that.
No, I would still make that argument. It's not what I meant. For example, I'll give you guys an example of what we find. First of all, Arucham Eretz Mida Ruchav Miniyam, the way the Torah is described in Scripture itself, is that it's infinite. It's broader than deeper than the seas. Additionally, we find this great story about Rabbi Akiva. This is in the book of Yevamos, 15, I think 15a. There's this, I don't want to get you the whole story, it's a fascinating story, but we're a little bit strapped for time. But either way, Rabbi Akiva, the great scholar of the Mishnah, he meets someone, and the guy is starting to talk to him, and the guy realizes, he asks Rabbi Akiva 300 questions, 300 unanswerable questions, Rabbi Akiva answers them one after another. Then he says to him, "Oh, you're the famous Rabbi Akiva. You should know that even though you've studied so much Torah, you're no better off than a shepherd of big animals, like livestock." And Rabbi Akiva responds to him, No, you're wrong. I'm no better than a shepherd of small animals." That's the exchange. Which, if you read it, it seems obviously bizarre. But when you understand it, what it's saying is what it seems to be saying is that Rabbi Akiva was also a humble person, and he said, "Well, I'm even less than what you think I am. You think I'm little, I'm even less." That's, I think, the simplest way to understand it. But I think what it's really trying to tell us is the lesson about Torah. Rabbi Akiva had a tremendous understanding of Torah. And this story demonstrates it. The 300 unanswerable questions, he answered them boom, 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 one after another. He was the undisputed master of Torah. He had a more of understanding of Torah than anyone around. The person told him, by the way, you should know, you have tremendous understanding of Torah, a relatively tremendous understanding of Torah. However, in relationship to the total capacity of Torah understanding, you're nothing more than a shepherd of big animals. And Rabbi Akiva responds to him, no, the Torah is even greater than what you think. He wasn't lessening his own perception, saying, no. The Torah is even more vast. Thus, my understanding in respect to the total, the total, value of Torah or knowledge of Torah is even smaller. Not because it's on an absolute level, but on a relative level. That idea is the idea you find when you study Torah. That the more you know, the more you realize how little you know. And I find it fascinating where you have some guy, 12-year-old kid who maybe could parrot over 13 verses in Leviticus. That kid knows, that's it, I did my Torah, right? I'm done, and I'm free to go now. Yet you have maybe a scholar or a sage who studied Torah his whole life and has gone through the entire Talmud multiple times, and every time they go through, they find more stuff, and they know that they themselves feel like they know nothing, which is an irony that you find. Thus, the Torah and science as well are ways that we could really understand God, and now understand it on a real level and even on an emotional level. Yes, we could give good definitions of God. We could understand it. We could have it defined to us. That does work. However, the Torah opens up an avenue for us to understand it in a much deeper and even on an emotional level as well.
So in this context, the bottom line is understanding means loving.
No, I said so I separated them as they can be mutually exclusive.
The question was how do we love God?
Yes. So that's how when this devotion towards the Torah or even the science that brings this insight that's expressed in a pleasure that Maimonides talks about as the greatest pleasure ever, and that's the emotion.
But that kind of feeling is an ephemeral kind of thing, and when you realize, get it, and it goes away, you're to the next problem.
Okay. So then
I don't think it's referring to that kind of love.
But then maybe we haven't gotten it yet. If it doesn't fit into the qualifications, maybe we're not there yet.
Because you want the floor?
Oh,
Maybe. Maybe there's levels. Maybe that you get a small taste of that, and then maybe it makes you feel good the whole day, and that's great. But maybe sometimes when you go back to what you wrote in college when you spent 6 months on a problem, maybe that kind of you could relive that same wonderful pleasure. Maybe
it's a preview of the Olam Haba.
That's you're taking it a step too far, but you're right. You took the words out of my mouth, literally. Well, not really, not out of my mouth because I wasn't planning on saying it. Took it out of my head because there's a whole topic about this. But how Olam Haba, Maimonides describes it as the greatest pleasure that ever existed, and then he describes it the same way. And then wait a minute, it's Olam Haba. What about is it in this world? You started talking about this world. This may be some sort of portal to that kind of pleasure, which is interesting.
Yep.
Very interesting. Either way, that's number 10. We'll move to 11, guys. What do y'all say? Intermission? Because we're going to be here till 12 midnight. Somebody check the scores for the Rockets game for everyone else. I was joking.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to number...
Creating new worlds.
So, what was number 10?
52, 46.
To bring us to at halftime. Okay, it's at halftime, guys. We could to bring us to love of God and to bring us to a certain higher level of faith and comprehension of God as well.
Our allness of this insight is equated to love. That's what you're.
No, I'm saying it could even bring about to that level. It means it could even it can even bring. I'm saying it's going to give us a great appreciation of faith, and even potentially to an emotional degree of faith.
Which you're equating to love.
Yes, which is what we say with love of God. That's right.
And the science, after your explanation, it seems more of an analogy to me than a literal study of science, in that the scientist going down the path, the more he learns, the more he realizes he doesn't know. It's an opening of an expansion, the expanse of what's out there, the expanse of what's not known.
What's out there or what's in there? There's two ways to do it. What's out there in the cosmos and what's in there in the cell, right? Both of them can bring you to the same place. Both of them are equally vast. But so, what are you saying? What's out there? So yes.
Well, I think he may have been referring to science just because he was a scientist, but anybody in any field, the more they study, the more they realize there's more to learn. No, that's not what I'm saying.
What are you saying, Jeff? Yeah, yes. But what are we discovering?
If you're at the stage,
we're discovering what was already there. It's not like DNA was invented in the 50s, right? DNA was always there. Right? Huh? We're discovering what was already there, what got put there.
There's this analogy, the philosophers of science, like Karl Popper, they describe this process of scientific discovery as a circle. When you know more, you expand the circle. Now, what you don't know, which is the limit, grows too. So the more you grow the body of knowledge, the more the more you know what the boundaries, the more you know what you don't know, and there's no limit to this. So the more areas. I mean, you can see in science all the areas that appear, and every area there are like millions of questions that we don't know. And then when you grow more areas where you don't know, millions of answers.
And there's still a lot more room to run. We have something called a brain. It's a 3-pound organ in our skull, and we know very, very, very little about it. Like what we know is from what lights up when someone has certain emotion. Like that's all we know.
We know the weight. You just said it.
Okay, the weight, and we know where it is. And we have given really nice.
I think the point that I'm trying to make, I have an example. My grandfather, when he died at night when he was around 4 years old, okay, and he was coughing up a lot of. But it's and the doctor said we can do all these tests to figure out what's causing him to do it, but it's going to be very hard on him. So we decided we're not going to risk it. And somehow, miraculously, he survived it. The doctor said he's not going to survive the night. He survived. So we can say that, there was some miracle of God that he survived, or there could be some medical explanation as to why it happened.
But that's not.
Just because you don't know what the reason is.
Yeah, but I'm not, that's not what I was even saying. I'm not saying God's intervening in science. I'm saying just even the realities that's there, that are demonstrably there. Well, how'd they get there? Right. So we say that if you believe in God, then you believe that God is the creator. Right. That's what it means to believe in God. Right. Thus, He created a very complex world within our bodies. Like you mentioned, it's very complex. Our brains and our cells and hundreds of trillions of cells and whatnot, all being perfect, and our livers and our hearts, it's very, very complex. And and you go to this, any realm of science, it could be in the earth sciences or the physics or in the astronomy. They're all portals to see complexity of creation. That's all I said. I'm not saying that every time it's God intervening. It's I'm not. I didn't say that. I didn't say it now. I'm not sure if I agree with that. That's a big debate. Is there any room for the that's maybe another few nights, but that's a good argument that we could have. Is there some things that just happen? Someone gets sick and they just get well, I think that
why the sun rises up in the
right, is that pre-programmed or not? Right, that's okay. Well, there's a lot of actual explanation.
You can always
Does
push
the
the
sun.
Yeah,
Does
there's-
the sun actually rise, or is the Earth turning?
why is it rotating? Why does the orbiting planet how that actually works?
Isn't the Earth in the center of the universe? And you're in the Earth.
I thought Argentina was the galaxy.
The universe.
The universe.
How do you get here, right?
I wasn't saying what you said I was saying. I'm not trying to defend what you said I was saying. I'm not trying to or repudiate what you said I was saying. But either way, that was my point. My point is that these are areas of complexity that could bring us to God. What's that? As another example, Maimonides, when he talks about in the beginning of the laws of idolatry, he gives a very interesting history of idolatry and also a history of monotheism. He talks about how Abraham used science. What science means is observing and interpreting and analysis of physical phenomena. That's what science means. He used that to reach God, reach an understanding of God. So that's an example that we could still use. Shall we? Number 11.
That's actually an interesting point for another.
Mm-hmm. How many more nights do we have?
Scientist.
Abraham the scientist. Okay, so what's number 11? Study Torah fits character. We are all born into a world with a mixed bag of positive and negative character traits. We call it in Hebrew midos, or the Rambam calls it deos. These are, how we behave and how we interact. Yeah, behavior or character traits, different words for the same thing. But this is obviously, some people are more patient and some people are less patient. Some people are more quick to anger, and some people, a little bit more mellow, and some people are more generous, and some people are more, et cetera, et cetera. With every area, there's maybe hundreds or even thousands of different areas in where some people naturally excel and some people naturally have room for improvement. And the discovery of or the cataloging of someone's own personal portfolio of positive and negative character and subsequent fixing of the character is a major, major theme in Jewish life. As I even mentioned, the Rambam, we talked about it in the 5 sections that he tackles in the first book, right? The important sections of Jewish life, arguably. And that is, one of them is a whole section on fixing character. It's very, very important. We know Abraham is presented as someone who excelled in character. Right? And it's no secret that he has such an important place in Jewish life. Maybe those two things are linked. And Moses is the most humble man that ever lived. It says that, and we know that his role is a very important role. It doesn't seem that it's to be incidental that he was humble. The great people in Jewish life are the people that have accomplished in conquering their character, in overcoming their character, in perfecting their character, fixing their character, cleansing their character, purifying the character. Right? Now, how do we do that? How do we go about doing that? So we find a statement in the book, the Mishnah, in Peah. Peah is a section of the Torah that talks about what to do with the corner of your fields. And you guys all look like farmers to me. So Jewish, we know that in Israel, there's when agricultural laws in Israel, is that when you have a field, you have to leave the corner of your field to the poor person. That's the mitzvah of the Torah. And there's an entire book of the Mishnah written about it. The first Mishnah starts off with Eilu dvarim shadam ochel perotem olam hazeh v'akeren kayemet olam haba. These are the things that someone enjoys the fruits of it in this world, but the principle remains for the world to come. Ve'eluhein, that gives a whole list of these wonderful things that someone could do in this world, wonderful mitzvahs that someone could do, that they get the fruits of that in this world. However, the principle is for next world. What does it mean, the fruits? What does it mean, the principle? What does that mean? What do you get the fruits? Right. So there's the fruits are more like the ancillary benefit. If you own a tree, then you own the tree, right? But the fruits are kind of like the annuities of the tree. It's still not the principle, but it's something that's a nice benefit. One of the commonly accepted understandings of that Mishnah is that the fruits are the positive qualities that are engendered with those mitzvahs. For example, honoring your parents is one of them. Honors your parents, well, then they become more appreciative. What it means to honor your parents means to recognize what your parents do for you. You become more of an appreciative person. You recognize when someone does good for you, and you reciprocate. One of them is to bury the dead, engage in taking care of the dead person. Well, what is that? That's chesed. That's kindness. Right? Why? Because this is the kindness which is the purest form of kindness, because you don't seek to get anything back. Right? When I help Diego, I'm thinking, well, if I have an issue, I'll call him up. If I need to translate something into Portuguese, I'll call him up. Sorry, Spanish?
Yeah.
Whatever, Castellano.
That was borderline offensive.
Sorry.
He will tell his wife. His wife is from Brazil.
So, when I'm nice to Ben, I'll say, well, my air conditioner goes down, I'll call him up for advice, right? All kindness that we do with people that are extant, we could have underlined, motives. Thank you for our activities. When you do kindness to the dead person, unless the family's watching, maybe, but you do kindness to the dead person. That's it. You're doing it just to become a kind person. Well, it's a mitzvah. Burying that is a mitzvah, and it changes who you are. It gives more examples. It's waking up in the morning to go to pray. What happens when you have to wake up in the morning? You want to hit the snooze button a few more times. You want to say, let me be a little bit lazier. I can 5 more minutes, right? 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes, and that accumulates. 8 more minutes you have?
8, right? The snooze is 8. 9.
You can continue.
So, and then what is someone who says, I'm getting up? What does that mean? That means that they're overcoming their laziness. So yes, it's a mitzvah on its own. Sorry? It's a mitzvah on its own, but there is a ancillary benefit that you get. And the last thing, the Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. The Torah study is equal to all of them. The whole list. Thus, it's telling us that Torah study perfects our character more than anything else. And it's a mitzvah.
So you can snooze if you study.
Yeah, well, in your sleep? You study Torah in your sleep?
Put it on your pillow.
It has an audio.
They used to do that in the 70s. Back in the 70s. Put it on your pillow.
Now,
but you also, if you learn Torah, you know that every mitzvah will have a reward in Olam Haba.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
but some
you
of them
can
don't affect
always-
you in this world.
Even if you do a mitzvah for dead person or something,
That's true.
you still know. If you don't know the Torah, then you will be doing truly altruistically. But if you know Torah, you know you have rewards.
So this is another night. This is something as altruism. Well, what if? Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Is doing something for Olam Haba, is that altruistic or not? Is that lishma or not?
Right, but if you don't know Torah,
That's a good question. I think I might have to skip a few of them down because I have something that where I mentioned something related, perhaps to this. Either way, Torah study is more effective than any one of these other ones to bring in someone to fix their character. Why? It's a good question. That's all I got, really. Everything else here is from here on out is my own thoughts, perhaps, in the matter. I was thinking of a few different thoughts. Number one.
So may I ask about this fixing the character? Now thinking on the fly.
Go ahead.
Is it trying to homogenize kind of us, making us all equal at the end? If we fix when we get angry, it seems like it will. Is the objective or the ideal that we all become equal?
We all become equal, or not. Whatever. Right. No. So I don't think equal. I don't think that's the right perspective.
Most of the things that you mentioned are some people get angry, some people are more inclined to this. But if we all follow the 1631 when the
all,
temple is here.
you know, but what do you mean all? You mean all Jews or all people?
Yeah,
or
all
humanity?
Jews. Let's say all Jews.
Okay. Well, why all equal? Why don't you say better? Why say why don't we all become great?
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
That's
One
all
is
I'm
someone
saying
who
about
looked,
it.
someone who's perfected themselves. They're a perfect person. They have, like the Rambam tells us, is the perfect balance. You know, that they're
80-20.
right.
What
They
is
80-20, 80-20 rule. It's more like the 90-10 rule. But that's a great person. It's not someone who's just like equal or average. That's greatness. We equate that with greatness. You know that the Rabbi Israel Salanter, the great Jewish personality of the 19th century, he famously quipped that to change your even one characteristic trait entirely, to totally change it, is it's harder than to study, or it's easier. I'm sorry, it's harder than to study the entire Talmud. It's easier to study the entire Talmud, all 11 pages of the Talmud, than it is to fundamentally change one characteristic.
When the Mashiach comes,
Someone changes them all of them. Well, that's a pretty remarkable person.
when the Mashiach comes, it's going to be as if every baby is born without being slapped. So,
Whoa, where was that come? Where did that come from?
well, I mean, we're all going to be
Don't slap my babies.
elevated, huh?
Oh, you don't. Oh, Mullar's there.
So there's not going to be an evil side for us to try to overcome anymore.
Well, I won't agree with you saying technically. Because I know what you're saying is it's not when Mashiach comes. Mashiach comes, at least according to the Rambam, there's no change. However, there is the Talmud in Sukkah, which I assume what you're referring to, 52a, that talks about La'asid Lava, which is a totally different.
52b.
It's a totally different time period, which talks about the idea of the Yitzhak being slaughtered and everyone crying and why they're crying and what they see. And someone looks like a mountain, someone looks like a strand of hair, and everyone's crying. Yes, there is this idea, but I think when Mashiach comes, man, nothing's going to change. At least that's what the overwhelming.
So he
thing
could have
is.
come in 2008.
Well, there's going to be a certain. He could have. Is this a joke? Or something?
Probably he has somebody in mind. I mean, some Chabadniks, they thought that the Rebbe, the last one,
He died in 1994, so
94.
93 or 94. 94.
But some people in that circle thought that
Some people think
he
he's
was
still
alive.
alive.
Oh, you mean
Really?
Graveyard?
Yeah, there are those ice bucket people.
Hardcore. Yeah. I mean, I
He's
remember
still
that.
alive,
Was it
coming back, or
Yeah,
that's not such a new idea. We heard that before.
Rebbe Senior?
Yes.
The alleged Messiah that dies is coming back. Either way, yeah. So
What were you saying about death a few minutes ago?
death.
Yeah, burying the dead.
Yeah, that's a big mitzvah,
Because the person, you're not.
and it's
you're
especially
not-
effective in character transformation because it's done with entirely pure motivations.
Can you explain how that relates to second Pesach? Yes.
What about the second Pesach?
People that
They
were
were
taken in
impure,
the
so
first
they
place
had a
off.
second Pesach.
Yeah.
Oh, they were burying the dead. Well,
Because isn't that
when the
motivation,
temple is in existence and someone touches a dead person, they can't walk back in the temple.
right?
You need to have a purification process. We get the red heifer and the ashes and whatnot. So that would preclude them from coming in to go to the temple for
For the
Passover.
Pesach, so they had a second
to bring
one.
the
So
sacrifice.
isn't that not pure motivation to do? So they're complaining. And
Well,
the second-
yeah, it's still a big mitzvah, and it's still a huge mitzvah to tend to the dead people, even though it may invalidate someone from coming to the temple. Now, a Kohen, they don't go to funerals, or they don't go to funerals, but they don't go and come in contact with that person because they have a separate mitzvah not to come in contact with that people. But for us Israelites, unless Pesach is coming, or we don't need to be pure. That's why it's a big mitzvah. And I would also say, by the way, just once you brought us back to that topic, I think it's also very when you come in contact with that, like when you go to a house of mourning, that also I think would change you because it kind of makes you realize how transient this world is and how you could be here today and you could be gone tomorrow. And you could, and who knows? Who knows which one of us Who knows if we're all going to last out the week? We hope so. We assume so, right? But we don't know, right? And that sometimes, unfortunately, is very shocking. And it's very jarring. And it makes us realize something which is, I think, a very important realization, that we're here to work, and we're here to accomplish, and we're here to change our lives and change the lives of people around us, become great people, and do good, and not to get complacent, because we could be plucked out of this arena any second, any day, any minute. We don't know. And that is a very important thought. And maybe when you bury the dead, maybe you'll think about that. Maybe that'll help you also change your life. Just another thought. Either way, so the Torah is more effective than any of this to try to make us change our character. So I said right now this is theorized why. Perhaps because the Torah, the Talmud, study of Torah brings us to action. Thus, the Torah is kind of a gateway to all the other things. Wherein, if you just do something, you're an expert at honoring your parents or burying the dead, or right, then you're kind of, that's what you have, that's what you got. Supposed to, when you have Torah, you have everything, because the Torah teaches you about these things. You study Torah and you study this Mishnah, wow, and you open up you expand your activities to include all these other things. Thus, essentially, it's kind of the be all end all. It's the magic pill which brings you to everything. That was one thought I had. Or additionally, I thought maybe to study Torah, it demands self-control. To sit down and study Torah, it's your mind's racing and you got to focus, and all the things are popping into your head, and you have to kind of zone in. Well, that's a hard thing to do, and that work to control yourself. Well, controlling yourself is another gateway characteristic to all good midos. Everything that the dominion of the Yetzer Hara that we talked about, this mountain that you don't like so much, that was on top of us, right? That is controlling us, and that's why we said that this idea of someone not being free. When we gain the control back, so to speak, then we're open to make our own decisions, and we have the control. And studying Torah demands self-control more than anything else. And that maybe that would bring us to all these other positive qualities. These are the thoughts that I've had. Perhaps another thought.
So next class we go from 11 to 20.
We go into multiple worlds yet.
That's the one that we need to.
Yeah, that's
time.
that was-
Create
That's
new
the
worlds.
one. That's the one. Create new worlds. We got enough problems with our world.
And this is the
Either
7th?
way, I'm sorry.
This is the 7th.
This is the 11th.
11th.
Can't believe we only got.
The 7th universe that God created.
I don't know. I'm happy with whatever I have. All I know is what I have. Either way, these are some nice thoughts, I think, for us to once again gain an appreciation for Torah study and the remarkable impact that it can have on our lives, and to not view it, God forbid, as being something historical or something ancient, something arcane or something archaic or something esoteric or something maybe relegated to the libraries and to the scholars, something that could be very relevant to us in the multitude of different areas of our lives. Therefore, we should maybe try to, once we have that realization, we can maybe seize more opportunities, or at least when we do have the study, to have a greater appreciation of what that does for us as individuals. Okay, amen. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you all. And I guess if you guys want next week, we can continue. I don't know if I have so many more